AQA Lit Paper 1 is around the corner, so it's time for my comprehensive guide on how to do well. Better than well. Firstly, it might seem obvious, but how does the exam actually work? Some people forget that they only need to choose 2 questions. You get a whole booklet with different texts in it. Only pick the 2 questions that you have been studying since year 10. So for my class, it would be Macbeth and Jekyll and Hyde. So when you open the booklet, you'll see a whole range of text and a whole range of questions. Only for section A, answer Macbeth or whatever text you're doing. For section B, answer the Jekyll and Hyde one. For each of them, you are given an extract. You do not need to include the extract in your first paragraph. It does say starting with the extract and then give you the question. Doesn't mean that you need to make paragraph 1 about the extract, and you don't even need to make a whole paragraph about the extract. You just need to include at least one quote from it. It can be a linked quote, whatever, as long as you've included it at least once. But more importantly, you need to talk about the whole text or the whole play. You can't just speak about the beginning of the play or the end of the play. It needs to be in some sort of chronological order and speak about more than one aspect of it. Doesn't mean you need to include every single detail of the play or the text, but you do need to include what happens at the beginning, what happens at the end, and like a sort of development of whichever character or the theme that you were given. You are assessed in 3 different ways. So assessment objective 1 is your basic knowledge of the text. So the way you write points, the fact that you know the actual story that you are referencing from. Have you included evidence? Have you included a clear big idea? Assessment objective 2 is your methods. So your overall analysis, your noble sentences, structural features, language methods, all of that. And then AO3, assessment objective 3, is your context. So any outside the text references. So for example, in Macbeth, this would be the great chain of being, the divine natural order, gender, stereotypes. For Jekyll and Hyde, this would be things like the theory of devolution, Lombroso's theory, etc. All 3 of these things must be included in your paragraphs, in your essay. Otherwise, forget about it. Timing, very crucial. You get 1 hour, 45 minutes for this. Spend some of that time planning and then spend most of that time writing, making sure that you give an equal amount of time to both essays. So don't write a banging Macbeth essay and then forget about the Jekyll and Hyde one, and you've written about one thesis and a short paragraph for Jekyll and Hyde and think that you're going to get a decent grade. You have to make sure that you answer both questions, because the whole paper is out of 64, 30 marks for Macbeth, 4 marks for spelling, punctuation and grammar in your Macbeth essay, and 30 marks for your Jekyll and Hyde essay, which means you cannot afford to miss one whole question out. Do not make the mistake of spending 20 minutes writing a thesis when for a thesis all you need is one overarching statement. You basically need 2 sentences. Your first sentence should talk about the text as a whole, linking to the question. So for example, if my question was on corruption, let me just read my thesis. I would say, arguably Shakespeare wrote Macbeth in the Jacobean era to expose the corrupting influence of power and the moral decay that follows when individuals defy divine order. That would be my first sentence. So it's just an overarching statement that links to an outside the text reference and links back to the question. Because my question was on corruption, my link to an outside the text reference is define the natural order. Now my second sentence would actually specify who I am going to speak about in the play, so it should be a clear inside the text reference. So for that I could write, this corruption can potentially be seen through Macbeth, who begins as a brave and loyal soldier but becomes a paranoid and morally broken tyrant after succumbing to temptation and committing regicide. So the important part of a thesis is that you have an overall summary of the play, which shows your development of a character from the beginning to the end. So it shows how he starts and how. You might want an example for Jekyll and Hyde, so let me give you one. Literally worded exactly the same way. So we've got a first statement, which is arguably Stevenson wrote Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde in the Victorian era to explore how fear of the unknown and loss of control could expose the darker aspects of human nature. Full stop. So I forgot to say that would be if my question was on how is fear presented. And then remember, my second sentence has to include something from the actual novel itself. So I would say, this escalating fear can be seen through Hyde's violent actions, Jekyll's involuntary transformations, and Lanyon's terror of duality, revealing how Victorian societal expectations can intensify both the physical and psychological impacts of fear. So in this way, I've included a more thematic thesis, because each of my paragraphs will include me talking about somebody else. So I'd be speaking about Hyde's violence in paragraph 1, Jekyll's involuntary transformations in paragraph 2, and then people's reactions to it. And in paragraph 3, I will be speaking about Lanyon's terror, so when he actually sees a transformation happen. So I hope that you will have no issues writing a thesis, and it should take you 5 minutes or less to do that. Okay, now going on to the actual paragraphs itself. So before I actually break down a paragraph, I'm about to do another video, I want to tell you what not to do. Please never ever retell the story in your paragraphs. Nobody wants a summary of the whole story. We want analysis. So don't just list quotes and list what has happened in the play or the novel. You need to actually analyze every single aspect of the quote that you choose and relate it back to the question. One common mistake is that people will write a quote, list the method, and then not explain it. So they might say something like, Shakespeare uses Macbeth's ambition. He says vaulting ambition. This is a metaphor. Therefore, Macbeth is presented as ambitious. Where is the explanation? That is the key part, which is what is going to get you the mark. Break down every single quote. The way to revise quotes is write down your quote, break it down into different parts, analyze it as a whole, analyze the method, analyze one or two words within that quote, link it to context, link it back to the question. So you've basically forensically analysed that one quote. Then you can move on to a link. Don't just list quotes for the sake of it. The examiner doesn't want to know that you've memorised multiple quotes. They want to know that you've understood the quotes that you have studied. Please do not ignore context. Don't ignore it at all. So yes, maybe you're now a whiz at analysing quotes. You can do that very nicely. You can break it down, but you've forgotten to include anything about breaking the great chain of being, or something about, I don't know, Guy Fawkes, King James I, supernatural, anything, as long as it's related to the question. Another thing I will say is, I know this sounds a bit like contradictory because I'm on TikTok, but don't just listen to every single TikTok video that you are told about the exam. Some people like list at the top, oh, grade 9 Neville analysis. It's not always a grade 9 Neville analysis. It's just a bunch of words that are mixed up together to make it look like it's amazing vocab, an amazing looking example. But examiners do not want you to regurgitate something that you've heard online. As long as you understand what you are writing, it will be fine. And as I keep saying, as long as it links to the actual question itself. So for Macbeth, these are the things that you need to know. So if you make a plan for each of these things, and you understand the character of Macbeth, you understand the character of Lady Macbeth, you are prepared for basically anything. I will make separate videos on a couple of these themes. Just know, for example, Macbeth is a tragic hero. He starts off as honourable, ends a tyrant. The key idea about Macbeth is he has internal conflict versus the external sort of evil around him. Don't make the mistake of trying to say, oh, dangers of the supernatural, if the supernatural question comes up, because it's not trying to express that the supernatural themselves are the danger, or is the danger, sorry. It is in fact human ambition, because as we've said before, if the witches gave that same prophecy to Banquo, he would not have gone and committed regicide to become the king. They know that Macbeth had that ambition. They want to start trouble. Macbeth went out of his way to commit regicide. The witches did not tell him, kill the king to become it. They said that you will become king. They didn't say when. Lady Macbeth, not all you need to know, but understand that she subverts gender roles. She starts off as more powerful than Macbeth. She tries to convince him, manipulate him, and then she becomes overwhelmed by guilt by the end of the play. In terms of Jekyll and Hyde, these are the key themes that you need to know. I should try and make a couple of videos on some of these themes, but as long as you know those and have made a plan on each and every one of them and have quotes for them all that you understand, you should be fine. The thing is with Jekyll and Hyde is, like, all of these themes, you can almost use all the same quotes for them. Just don't forget things like the Victorian society was obsessed with reputation, being the perfect Victorian gentleman. They used to repress their desires, the theory of devolution, fear of science going too far. Anyway, last minute tips: read the question carefully, find something in the extract to focus on related to the question, think of 3 to 4 other key moments in the play or novel, have a big idea, analyse methods, analyse words, include context. Don't take this as a be-all and end-all, but my overall predictions for Macbeth is a possibility that is going to be supernatural. A lot of people say kingship, they say that every year, and maybe guilt. For Jekyll and Hyde, I think it might be something to do with reputation or being respectable as a gentleman, maybe linking to Utterson in a way, possibly duality, secrecy, anything like that. But revise everything and you'll be fine.